Good evening, televiewers. Welcome to Prime Hour on My Media Prime, an edition this evening that is going to be looking at trending coups in Africa, asking the question as to whether it's time to have a rethink as far as democracy is concerned in our continent, Africa. We are going to be looking at this topic tonight with our panelists who are with me in the studio. We are welcoming Dr. Michael Ndimancho, who is a lecturer with some universities in Cameroon, also member of Cameroon Civil Society. We're glad to have you. Good evening.
Thank you so much, Mr. Leo. Thanks and welcome back. I'm sure the first time we're meeting too. After seeing how civilized democracies are over there, I'm sure you have a better story to tell than yes, exactly. So thanks for inviting me.
We also are in the company of Robert Malangfe, who is sitting in for the CPDM party. Good evening, Robert. We're glad to have you.
Good evening to you. Good evening to my co-panelists. Good evening to the entire My Media Prime institution for giving us this opportunity to always be able to express our view on things happening in our nation. Special good evening to all Cameroonians that have taken their time to sit in front of their TV screen to watch us analyze issues that are happening in the country, the continent, and the world at large. Permit me to greet all mayors in the Northwest and Southwest most especially, and I want to take this opportunity to inform all mayors that we have just 2 years for the next elections, and it is not time for us to be getting information at the Central Committee that workers have not been paid for 8 months. And it's so embarrassing to see the set mayor speaking on TV to say these workers have been manipulated by someone. You don't pay people for 8 months and you say they have been manipulated? How do they take care of their children to go to school and all this? Mr. Kum Leonard, we have our supreme leader, President Pobia, and when certain people do certain things that it will discredit him, I will have to denounce it. So I've already done it. So Mr. Kum Leonard, thank you. We can continue. I've already done it.
This is not a program for that. We also are in the company of Ndi Lucas, coming all the way from Boya, Southwest Regional Capital. He is also a member of Cameroon Civil Society, leading an organization that is taking care of destitute children, especially victims of the ongoing crisis rocking the Southwest and Northwest regions. So good evening and welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Kum. Good evening, my co-panelists. It's a pleasure to be here tonight.
We also hope to have Paddy Asanga join us in tonight's edition of the program. Good evening, Paddy. If you are on, we're glad to have you once again.
Yes, good evening. Good evening to Lucas. Good evening to Ndimancho. Good evening to my good friend who is of the CPDM party. And I also want to welcome you back home from a well-merited holidays. It's rather unfortunate that when I was in Cameroon, our programs crisscrossed, but all the same, I think it is our house. We are here to educate our people and to say the truth. And I think that you have come back with a lot of energy and you will be able to handle the program as you have done it in a very brilliant style for the past year. So I am here and let's have a conversation.
Starting with you, Paddy Asanga, you are out of the country, but the continent Africa is very shaky. We have the coup d'etats that are en vogue as we speak, and the times are not the best. Many persons are asking the question why we are living these moments when we thought we had forgotten these military takeovers in Africa. What would account for the rise in the population rather looking onto the military to salvage their worries?
Yes, Leo, the phenomenon of coup d'etats is not new in Africa, and you have to remember that after the post-independent period, the fictitious independence that was granted to most African countries, there were a panoply of coup d'etats with people who actually wanted to, against leaders who actually wanted to gain real independence. They were taken out. And when you get, in total, you have had a panoply of about 277 coup d'etats in Africa. I think 100, less than a half of those coup d'etats succeeded. Most of them failed. And, you know, we are having a situation where, at the time, people who were making the, who were orchestrating or who were behind the coup d'etats were colonialists who took out people who could not, would not want to yield to their demands or who would not work according to their dictums. And today the reverse is true. The coup d'etats are being perpetrated by African military coup plotters who have learned, you know, some of these generals and colonels, they have been to school, they can read and write. You cannot dictate to them. They understand what geopolitics. They have come to understand that our place is not also in the barracks. Sometimes they also vote, but their vote doesn't count because these presidents who are seated there are puppets, and they are still, most of them are still remitted in the old software, which comprises of taking injunctions from Western countries and satisfying Western interests. And when you look at it from that holistic point of view, you will understand that the new waves of coup d'etat now is not the physical elimination, but to neutralize and re-conscientize Africans to stand for their rights. And when a coup d'etat is backed by the people, it gets that legitimacy where they say it is power from the people, or power of the people, for the people, and by the people. And most of these recent coup d'etats, those who perpetrate them, they are very comfortable with the people. But in those days, because lack of education and so on and so forth, you saw some people who even stood up and started singing songs. And the more reasons that you have these waves of coup d'etat is this phenomenon of presidents thinking that the country, l'état c'est moi, I am the state. They still have this Napoleonic way of thinking, and they think that once you are seated there, only death will take you out of that seat. So they want to manipulate the constitutions according to their whims and caprices, which at the end of the day doesn't play into their favor. And that has been the case of most of the 14 African countries that are remitted to France, and with no exception, both apart from a few who have tried and so on. But if you want to look at it from a very global and general perspective, you will understand that it has been a trend, and the very arrogant French policy in Africa from the time of Macron, Francois Hollande, Macron, and all the speeches, the derogative speeches, denigrating speeches, arrogant speeches that they have been making in Africa, has also pushed the people to gain consciousness. And one of the reasons that these coup d'etats are taking place, it is to give Africans their own dignity and tell these French and post-colonial dictators who are mostly seated in the West countries, calling themselves presidents, that the time is over and Africans are right now to take their destinies into their hands, and all those accords that were signed, the post-colonial accords, sacred accords after the colonies, they are no more valid, and we have to renegotiate and rethink the way we have to live together in the society of the nation, or what you want to call the concept of the nation. I think that is my own viewpoint as far as this whole thing is concerned, and I'm listening to you, Leo.
Okay, Robert, let me get to Robert Malanfe. Can we say it is also a sign that democracy as practiced in Africa is failing? If not, why do we have the population coming out to back what we find happening across the nations? In Mali, in Guinea, we saw the population back at the Mamadou Doumbouya, we saw Burkina Faso and Niger also. Can we say the people are tired with the type of democracy served them over these years?
I don't see it that way. I see it as a process of maturity. You know, today the West, they are where they are today. They've had numerous revolutions, which they stood against their various government, and today they are where they are today. And coming back to Africa, you realize that we have various coups. We have the coups done by the military. We have the constitutional coups done by those in power. And of course, we have the popular coup, when the population rise to say, Mr. President, we voted you in power, but will not give you the opportunity to finish your 5 years or your 7 years mandate, and they decide to take power from the president. Now, why do I analyze it as a process of political maturity? Now, when you look at coups in Africa, you realize that in the early 80s and 90s, we had a lot of coups, especially from the English countries, the Ghana, the Nigeria. I think Nigeria have about 10 coups as compared to all other countries. These English countries, because when you look at the system even of colonization, French used assimilation, while the British used indirect rule. And with the process of their maturity, you realize that British colonies were politically mature than those of the French. And after their independence, you realize that for them, the English country, to get matured, already they had their difficulties which they faced to have fixed constitution that they respect, the battle that military intervened in the 1980s and 1990s, where we had a lot of military coups within the English country. And as time went by and development is coming, you realize that French African countries now that are backward as compared to English country, they are the ones now having the military coups as compared to the English ones. And we've seen it in Senegal, we've seen it in Niger, we've seen it in Gabon, and in all the countries. So for me, my view after analyzing this process, I consider it as a revolution to strengthen the political structure. Before France is strong today, they had more than 5 revolutions to stable themselves. Before Britain is strong today, they had many revolutions, the Glorious Revolution and the rest, which the people had to structure the system to maintain and respect their constitutions and law. So that's my perspective.
We have had coups in Africa. Like he said, Paddy was talking about over 100 of them having taken place on the African soil. They were actually trending in some decades back. But what would they expect? What would explain the fact that the population is endorsing what these guys are doing, going by what we saw in Gabon and in Niger?
Yes, one thing we get to understand is that Africa was ready for independence and not for democracy.
Okay.
Yes, this is one thing we must underscore, that at that point when African nations asked for independence, and which of course the colonialists had to give unconditionally, Africans wanted just to have their freedom. They wanted to have their independence. But the idea of democracy was still an idea that was still very far-fetched. Given that, you know that we have had strongmen too in Europe and America who have helped build their continent. And Africa needed that too. We have strongmen, the likes of Benito Mussolini, we have Stalin, we have Hitler, all of those people who were strongmen. And you know why they came up? It was because of the economic depression.
Napoleon Bonaparte,
all of those. And they needed those people to come in to be able to help the people revamp the economy. There was depression. And you see, in the late of 1950s, 1960s, when Africans were being dashed or not given, the independence that they had, it was so euphoric, and at that particular moment, one thing we must know is that the Europeans, the colonizers, didn't want to leave. And because they didn't want to leave, they gave them a good in one hand and then remain holding the rope on the other hand. And that is why you realize that at that particular moment, they even opted for Africans to adopt what they call democracy. And this was for their own good, to say that at one moment in democracy they could be able to easily come in and re-influence the politics in the African continent. And that is what happened throughout the 90s. And that's why you saw that in Togo, in 1963, it didn't take, I mean, the Togolese didn't take them long for a coup to take place. You remember that of Olympio, that took place, Sibanos. In Togo, you have that in Nigeria in 1966, Murtala Muhammad. You have that in 1972. You had Kwame Nkrumah, where Acheampong came and took over from him. So you even in CRA, in Central African Republic, 1965, you had the issue of Jean Badel Bokassa and David Dacko. So you see that at that very moment, the people were overwhelmed to what they call independence. But then when they took the independence, they realized that, it was, it was empty. It was like a mirage, They thought there was something that was coming, and the people didn't see what was actually coming. And that is why the people now started developing those sentiments against what they call the civilian rule. And they thought that the best way to rule Africa, and even culturally, that Africans culturally have been ruled by strong men. Even though we usually say that there is democracy in the African continent. Yes, there's also democracy in dictatorship. This is one thing we have to understand, that there is also democracy in dictatorship. Africa was coming out from that background whereby they were better governed and ruled by people who were strong, people who were powerful. A weak person will not rule an African continent. And that is why you find that coming out over that period and getting on, and looking ahead and seeing that there was actually this euphoria, people were looking at that kind of a light to see a fast development, and they didn't see it. And what started happening? Now people started questioning and said, but these are the promises that you gave us. And given to the fact that, you see, Africans who took power as civilians, they became more of strong men than even the military. The promises that they give to the people do not see what is happening. And what is worse is that they, as civilians who think that they have taken power democratically, they do not want to relinquish the power democratically. And that is why the people they are discouraged. There's that disillusionment. People think election is no more a panacea, because election is one of the fundamental principle or the fundamental ingredient of democracy. And if election cannot assure that democracy, that long for democracy, then the people have to be disillusioned. You find that now, when you look at Africa, even the countries where you think that there is democracy, there is also still coup d'etat. Mr. Kedia talked about the constitutional coup d'etat. Who is free in Africa? Nobody is absolutely free, because if it is not by the barrel of the gun, it is by the institution, by the constitution, that people are violated. And that is even much more touching, much more violent, much more far-reaching. It has far more reaching effect than even the coup d'etat that we are talking about. So the people have looked at, and they after see that what the promises that they got, they cannot get it, and they know that they cannot get it through the election. What is the people left to do? What is left to be done is that strong men have to rise up against other strong men. Dictators and I usually say this to people, that in Africa at this particular moment, and I know that we are coming back to that moment that I'm talking about, we need enlightened despots. Because when you even look at in countries where we have had real dictators, what you call dictators, because in the eyes of the Europeans, the colonizers, when they say dictators, they just think that is somebody who is maltreating the people. I want to take an example of a country like Libya. When you look at Libya, which was ruled by a colonel for so many years, and you look at the country Libya, ruled by a colonel, ruled by a dictator, what the Europeans call dictator. In Libya, you have the people having free education, having free water system, having free electricity, healthcare, and all of those things. But it was ruled by a dictator. And that is why we think that at this particular moment, the people felt they were living in darkness. And what is that darkness? They have suppressed emotions. And at that moment where they feel that there is somebody who has come up to be able to express those unexpressed wishes that they have to come out. And when it's like you stay in the dark for so long and then you see light, you come out. This translates to the fact that even those who go around making campaigns, like we have our sit-tight president, I don't want to go into the issue of party politics here, sit-tight president who sit and rule for so long, when they go around the people come out. Why do they come out? They come out because they have been given bribe with few bags of rice or whatsoever, few francs. The people come out and cheer, and you really think that they are cheering for the dictator? They are not cheering for the dictator. It is because the people are desperate.
Okay.
Yes.
Lucas Ndi, doctor says that Africa was ready for independence and not democracy. How valid is that assertion?
Africa was not ready for independence. The independence of African countries did not actually come through that person who was ready. If you go to look at it, the way it was given to them, the Africans had to negotiate, and those who went in for the democracy of Africa, to tell you that they never had the power to determine the independence of Africa. You could see it in colonial agreements which they have with some of the colonial masters, especially within the West African countries, or the if you have to bring it to the 14 countries that France had control over in Africa, you would notice that the colonial agreement is so tight to the extent that it makes it very difficult for most of the people around these areas to determine how they have to carry their activity and the way they need to carry it. Someone who is ready would not go into that which we saw at the wake of the 1960s, like we did have. Now, when you look at these across the board, you will realize that the nationalists in Africa, who were in persons like the Thomas Sankara, the Kwame Nkrumah, who was later on assassinated, and it is very obvious that his outstating of his presidency was basically orchestrated by the British and the Americans. The CIA is actually very much aware of what they did. Now, this is to tell you that the Africans who were ready were not actually given that opportunity to emerge. Africans who were not ready, when we talk about the Africans who were not ready, we are looking at persons who accepted that African continent should be given what was called independence. And I want to say that it is very obvious that when something is being given to you, it is not given to you on a platter of gold. In fact, Malamfe here would tell you always that in politics, power is seized, power is not given. So if we have to look at it from that perspective, how did the Africans get the power which we are talking about? It was not given. So they negotiated with a few persons who were somehow enlightened. Now, coming back to that, if we are to look at the role of the military, which today is seen as a threat to persons who are orchestrating constitutional coup d'etat, Dr. Ndimancho said it all with regards to this. Now, as opposed to those who are involved in constitutional coup d'etat, the military wants to enforce its purpose against external threats and internal threats. And the military that are rising today in Africa, they have identified both internal threats and external threats. And they have decided that the ballot boxes, as opposed to what they are considered to be, is going to be the better way. Because if you look at their function, this is a man who has identified. Remember, they also have intelligence. And with their intelligence, they understand more. And you should also remember that when it is time to discuss on issues of the state, as you must have noticed with most head of state, they have to carry their intelligence into those discussions. And some of these intelligence are persons who understand exactly what is happening. And with this intelligence gathered so far, they have now realized that the nationalism that Africans sought to have in the wake of the 1960s, beginning around 1959, most of those who went in for it, people like the Robert Mugabe, people like the Kwame Nkrumah, we keep singing their names because if you compare the nationalism that was in these guys to the nationalism that we are seeing today in most of those who are carrying out constitutional coup d'etat, then you will realize that the military, in other words, is more better than some of these guys who take up a constitutional coup d'etat. Now, the major problem is that some of these military take over. The military also, on the other hand, with time, we are going to look at this, They operate more as neo-colonialists, because the neo-colonialism which is still on the continent, given that the military in Africa is not even independent, the military in Africa, in most African countries, they'll rely on aid. I want to be very vivid here. If we look at the military support that comes to most African countries, firstly, you do not know what intelligence is embedded in the hardware and the software being given to you. So these people, knowing this, they know what to do. But what I'm pretty happy with is that if we are to look at countries like the Burkina Faso, the Mali, the Niger, whom we are now looking at today in Africa as the countries with military rulership, I want to say that these guys are what we needed in the 1950s. They are the nationalists of the African continent. It's unfortunate that people like Robert Mugabe, Kwame Nkrumah, Muammar Gaddafi, they could not sit to enjoy the children they have trained, because they have the same mind which these people, whom the Africans saw in the 1960s as the real liberators of the African continent, and that which they desire. So, to simply put, the military takeover today in Africa, as opposed to democracy, has one loophole. And the only thing which I have identified in this is some of this military takeover do not meet up with the people's expectation. I want to take the case of Gabon next door. There is no gain in saying that the takeover in Gabon, as it is already identified by some of those who contested during the last presidential election, they see the bongos in the movement of this same military takeover. So this is a difference between the military takeover in West Africa and the military takeover in Central Africa. Though they are all French colonies, but if you compare these two, if you were to look at the population in Niger that comes out every now and then, the population in Mali, the population in Burkina Faso, for example, you cannot compare this to that which is currently happening. And it is against all this that those in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, they have decided to go into a pact, which they said, okay, these three countries who have been ostracized by their own regional bloc, ECOWAS, and others, they have resorted that whosoever touches one has declared war on all. Now you realize that this is the nationalist spirit of Kwame Nkrumah, when he said he was not going to rest until the African continent is completely liberated from the hands of the colonialists.
But nobody has threatened Gabon with intervention so far. Paddy Asanga, I want us to look at what is happening with the democracy in Africa. Okay, I'll read this, which says any adopted system must be anchored on the acknowledgement and respect of the basic principles of fundamental human rights, including the right to life, freedom of speech, association, assembly, political inclusivity, equal participation and representation, fairness and justice. These are tenets actually that characterize Western democracies. Do we have these structures existing, implanted in Africa, to be able to adequately move democracy in Africa like what obtains where you live? Do we have what it takes in Africa?
Mr. Liu, the concept of Western democracy was copy and pasted, not copy and adapted to the African context. So all those principles that the white boys left behind, it did not work in the mentality and the mindset of the Africans, because Western democracies, some of them, and they are 500 years old. And you cannot come into a continent where power actually lies in the hands of the local rulers. They are subordinates, and they don't have reason. You colonize them, and then a few years after, you tell them that no, you have to adopt our own principles, which we call democracy. Western democracy, every civilization has its own democracy. The type of democracy that is practiced in China will not work in Europe. The type of democracy that is practiced in India will not work in Europe. The type of democracy that is practiced in Japan will not work in Europe, and only Europeans and Western countries think that the type of democracy that is practiced by their civilization is going to work in Africa. Remember that when they came, it took them time. They did not only came and said, okay, democracy. No, they came with religion. And gradually, when the people started getting conscience, they came and implanted political institutions that are related to the white boys thing. But when pressure was exerted on those who were, they had no time to prepare those people. And if you had to prepare the people, they prepared a few leaders who were loyal to them. They did not prepare the mindset of the common man, apart from the fact that, okay, the black people had already embraced white catechists, priests who were hanging around. But the concept of their democracy, their constitutions, and the bylaws that follows that, it did not fit in the African context. That is why you saw a panoply of post-coup d'etats when they left, because virtually there were clans, very powerful clans, who were brought together to form countries, and some of them saw individuals who had no legitimacy, who had no anthropological roots, coming to dictate to their chiefs and their funds. And that phenomenon, we still have it today, because you understand that when you put it in the Cameroon context, you understand that all those post-colonial administrative units that have been imposed are contested in many places. And those want to supersede the traditional rulers, and whereas those are an emanation of colonialism, which doesn't really fit in any context. And they come in now with the military, with the barrel of the gun, and want to enforce their will. So if you Africans want to move on, they should abandon this Western concept of democracy and rethink their own democracy that respect the norms, the norms, customs, and traditions of every African unit. And that can only function when we have federal system, where you have people's cultures respected, people's language respected, people's beliefs, their shrines, and all those things respected. You want to understand that when you get into certain communities, their languages are almost extinct, but I'm happy that we have certain language which have been written. You have Douala that is written, you have Mungaka, you have Lamso, you have Hausa, I think you also have Fulbe that is written. But the truth is that when the colonialists came, they would come and try to teach you in a language and make you think that any language that you speak, which is not the one that, and you cannot articulate yourself, learn their phonetics and their consonants and their noun syntax and semantics, you are not good enough for their civilization. Sometimes they mock at us because of our accent. They say, okay, from your accent, I can guess that you are an African. But African from which country? Are you from Nigeria? Are you from Cameroon? Are you from... And. So we have to rethink our own democracy. And one of the things that this wind of change that is blowing towards Africa has to do is to make sure that we have a concerted debate on who we are, on our identity, our dignities, our traditions, our norms and cultures, how we have been violated. Remember that at one point we have seen chiefdoms, fondoms coming back to Europe to get back some of the relics that were stolen. And these things, they mean a lot to us. But for these white people, it's just a matter of touristic and telling their history, how powerful they are. We got this from Nso, we got this from Bafut, we got this from Manu, and so on and so forth. They keep it there and look it and remember the time where they were colonialists, where they were sitting and they are jubilating, celebrating how they went to Africa, conquered Africa, and are still getting raw materials from Africa till today. So Africans have to think their own democracy, but the Western form of democracy imposed on us Africans has failed, and I repeat, has failed. And some of these coups d'etats that are coming today, if they have to rekindle and give us our identity, I would be very, very, very happy. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. This one says, I'm happy the way the program is going. Time on. Please greet Robert for me. For the first time, he has explained something reasonable. This is the new era. We should stop being fooled by our grandparents on the throne, who keeps telling us tomorrow is for us and we are aging out. Acho writing from Bamenda. You won't imagine, Mr. Leo, a country that can't pay her teachers, the same leaders they say are leaders of tomorrow, who are not being taught. What a shame, Mr. Leo. Good evening to you and to everybody in the studio. Julius Chofo says, good evening, Mr. Leo and your panel. The problem was that for Africa, the transition from tribal kingdoms to the modern nation state happened too quickly and they were not ready for it. It took the England more than 800 years to move from small kingdoms like Mercia, York, Lancashire, etc. to the Kingdom of England, and another 800 years to the modern nation state of the United Kingdom. In the run-up to independence, African nations negotiated things as if two neighboring villages were entering into brotherly agreement. Then they had to adopt an alien notion called democracy. Okay, Julius Chofo watching from the United Kingdom. Good evening, and glad to always read from you. Good evening, Mr. Leo. Democracy is a scam in Africa. We better go back to the kingdom's era. Julius writing from Chang. Robert Amalangfe. When we see people rush out to celebrate the military in Niger, and knowing that Bazoum won elections 2 years after he was, before he was toppled, and Gabon, we saw the elections campaigns where the population came out for the deposed Ali Bongo, and we have always seen persons who are leading in polls or elections who get elected. Take the case of Ben Ali, who just won elections in Tunisia, where we saw the population jubilate when he was toppled. What is not working? That we find people who seemingly are for a civilian leader. Days after when he's toppled, the same population comes out in celebration.
Yeah, the context in these various countries, they are actually different.
Okay.
For instance, the case of Gabon. The main problem in Gabon is that the people were already tired of seeing the same face. It's not about that the leader of Gabon was not working. No, you can be a perfect leader. You work very well. But when somebody thinks, this man's father ruled for 42 years.
Yeah, but when he went around the nation for campaigns, you saw thousands of them line up the streets to celebrate him. These same persons came out to celebrate his departure.
The thousands that came out were his supporters. And among his supporters, he had loyal supporters that did not come out. And you have loyal supporters that were out to support him because they were hungry and were interested in what he was dividing. They came out when he was outed. And we also have people that were not even with him. Those people that don't care about politics, they were not voting. They also came out. So the coming out of people, these people are coming out in different contexts and in different areas. Even the people from his own village did not come out because they saw it in another perspective. But the main issue about that of Gabon was the fact that the military took advantage. Because for me, I call it a coup against Ondosa. Because they knew that actually he was the one that won. The military did not come to take power from Bongo and say that, okay, no, actually you are the one that won. No, it's their mafia. But for me, my own analysis about that one is the fact that the people were already tired to see a face of a father and still see the face of the son for more than a decade. Again, they were already tired. The case of Niger, it was just an aspect of frustration. That, can you imagine that in a year, the people of Niger don't have electricity for 90 days? In 365 days, the people of Niger don't have electricity, the rate of poverty there and the rest. So even though the president there was elected and he was there for about 2 years, even though his hand was tied, because talking about the issue of uranium, can you imagine that the world market is 200 euro and in a country is not up to 1 euro, is 0.8 euro. So when you look at all these things and the people are suffering and they know they have all this, there's that frustration that even when the military comes, they just believe that the military will come and change their frustration, which is something that I really don't buy. However, I realize that there are good military people that can do the job. We know of Gaddafi, we know of the guy Paul Kagame, we know all these guys that have put on uniform, even in Ghana, that change things. So the context in all these countries, they are different. And we also have the influence of the colonial masters. That's why in Niger, since it was against the interests of France, they called them putschists. And since in Gabon, it was in the interest of France, the French government decided to lay low and say the military, and they did not say putschists. They used terminology to suit their interests. Because when we talk about dictators, the definition of dictator is different from the definition of dictators by the West. When the West is not okay with you, what does the West do? They just tag you that you are a dictator. And so when you look at what Gaddafi did, is it normal that they should call Gaddafi a dictator? Because I know a dictator is somebody that rules with his wings and caprices without the respect of the judicial and the legislative institutions of his country. But when you look at another country, I'll take again another example. You look like a country like Ukraine. The president of Ukraine was collaborating with the president of Russia, and he was termed a dictator. Few years after, when he decided to shift away from Russia to work with the West, and Russia attacks the Ukraine, what does the West say? They say they have attacked a president and a nation that is very democratic. That was somebody that was called a dictator a few years back. So we should not mix the concept of the West when they want to kill our leader or destroy our leaders that are against them. They call them dictators. And after saying this, answering your question, I would like to go into what my co-panelists they said. Something that Cameroon was not ready for democracy. Africa was not ready for democracy. Something that Africa as a whole was not ready for independence. But the process of democracy is being built. It will not take 1 year. We cannot take African countries that have 50 years of independence and compare them with countries in the West that have constructed their own democracy for more than 300 years, and we think in a twinkle of an eye we can change everything. We should not have that mentality. We are building our democracy. I enjoyed the message of one of the panelists that explained this process, because we'll talk about being ruled by monarchs. Of course, Africa was ruled by monarchs, and even the whole of Europe. If you go to France, you hear of Bordeaux. But the difficulties we are having to have that fast maturity of our democracy is because in Africa we have states and not nations. Go to Europe, for instance, they are nations. You go to France, they speak English, they have their English culture, their constitution goes with their you go to France, they speak French, their constitution goes with their French culture. You go to Britain, they speak English, their constitution goes with their Anglo-Saxon culture. You go to Spain, the same thing, they have their own languages and their own culture. But when you come back to Africa, you realize that we are states. That is, they just gathered a geographical area with people in it and they just gave them a government. And we are not longer nation. Look for a country like, for instance, Cameroon. Cameroon is much more of a state than a nation, because we don't have one language, we don't have the same culture, more than 200 and something culture. How then do you think what democracy will be built faster? You say, okay, Mr. Paddy talked about having constitutions, that Africa should draw their own democracy that will go with their own culture. How do you do it in countries in Africa where a nation?
I'll disagree with that, because when you look at the situation, what brings us to that unity is that constitution. The constitution goes above the languages you are citing there, because giving the impression that the Brits or the French people can easily do the things they do because they have a single language. No, they have a single language as you see it, but they have two different traditions in this area. Go to France, like you said, the people in Monaco are not the same with the people in Bordeaux. they are not the same with the people in lands. You have this different nature of people within that same country. If you go to Britain, the people of Wales are not the same with Ireland. If you go to Britain, the Scottish people are not the same with the people from England. So when you look at these things, when you look at these things, Robert, you will realize that what they respect is the constitution. They do not respect their respective ends. That is accepted in their constitution, and this is what we have in Cameroon. For example, if we were to look at the case of Cameroon, which you cited, the Cameroon constitution says this country have 2 languages which they have made official. When the Queen died, you saw a certain culture in England that was sent across to all the British member countries. Now, the traditional English person does not look at things the way the traditional Scottish person would do. So now what brings them together, bro, is their constitution. So our problem,
I am saying that a constitution, when you look at sources of constitution, culture is part of it. You cannot say it's their constitution and not their culture. Culture, source of law, I think doctor will say that, you know that
our constitution has brought us
is culture
to the existing way of life.
Okay.
You get it? And when you talk about culture, you are talking about what summarily we are talking about the people's way of life, the way they do the things, the way they relate.
Just land, yeah.
When we talk about constitution is built from culture. Culture is one of the sources that build up a constitution. And when you go to France, yes, they have their different traditions, but they are similar. Like in Cameroon, you say Bamileke and Baminda, they have different traditions, but it is similar. You go to Britain, yes, the whale is there, but they have those similarities that bind them together. But in the context of Africa, we have different, that makes it become difficult for that our constitution to be constructed and to be respected.
Okay. Barrister Allen, writing from Rwanda, says, welcome back, Leo. Mr. Leo, beautiful program. Democracy is still the way out. We will take time, but it will be worth the time. You cannot trust someone who is so desperate to take power with a gun. Someone who kills 10 people to take power will kill 100 to maintain power. Alan is writing there. Doctor, how do you perceive what he just wrote and these military takeovers? What future, what does it say for democracy in Africa? Can they actually guarantee democracy, or they are leading us onto other paths that that would reflect who we are from the cultural and other backgrounds?
We have to come up to be mature as citizens of Africa. There is what usually they say in Cameroon, that so people talk about unity in diversity, which of course we really have to look at that very strictly. I listened to the argument of Nsanji and Mesa Kedia, and it falls in line with that, because it is not just the constitution. Well, the constitution is supreme. It's supreme, but you should know that the constitution alone does not bring people culturally together, but people accept to come together for the sake of a constitution that seeks to unite people. One thing you should understand, that even this issue, they say democracy. Democracy is the dictatorship of the majority over the few. You should know that. Yet we need to be very, very clear about that. That even though when we say democracy, it doesn't mean as if the whole country is in peace and as if there are no people agitating. Even in Europe and America, where there is this democracy, you still find people agitating when there are elections. When people even win democratically, you still hear that agitation. So it is about what? Accepting that we are different in so many ways, that even in America you have states that have different laws. Of course, but they accept to come together under one cover of what they call the constitution, which is important. But what is the future of military coups? As I said, we need to accept that diversity that we have, because one of the issues about military coups is the issue of culture. That you feel that okay, our ethnic antagonisms that we have in Africa, that there's one clan that has ruled, and therefore the next time another clan should rule. And once that chance is not given to that other clan to rule, then there is a problem. Cameroon is not different, because you hear people from different regions agitating. They say, power is in the center now. Next time it should go to the north, or next time it should go to west, and all of this. That is the thing. It should go to the Anglophones. I've even had people talking about next president should be Anglophone. And now, when it doesn't happen that it's not an Anglophone, what happens? Now there's a storm in the teacup. And that is how it all emanates. So what actually gets up above all of these things is that the collective interest of a country. That Africans should learn to value life. And when you have to value life, and it is because we have gone out of our calling. There is this thing we call the social communalism that we have in Africa, where South Africans even put it very well in their cultural belief, that there is this issue of one for all and all for one. Because if it doesn't come to this, you will always feel that you will have everything to yourself. We have embraced a different culture, which we call capitalism, whereby people think that you want all for me and nothing for another person. And therefore, the moment you even have what is yours, you are still not satisfied. Let me give an example. You look at what happened in Gabon. The person who took over power, Breeze, was a person who was close to the heart and mind of Omar Bongo, the father, and Ali Bongo, the son. Suppose I want to think that this gentleman had everything that he had, that he needed. But the issue is that of greed in Africa. And how can we stop this greed? We can stop this greed by distributing the wealth equally. You realize that most of these military coups that we have had in Africa, they are blamed on economic depression. They are blamed on mismanagement. They are blamed on corruption. And therefore, for there to be a solution of military coup, any leader that takes up power in Africa must be able to tackle these issues, must be able to tackle issues of mismanagement, to show that wealth is shared equally. And the issues of corruption, to be sure that what you gain is not yours, and not that you don't want to gain extra from what other people gain. And let people be assured, of their economic, social amenities that we have. Like what you had in Libya. I still want to quote this example because it interests me so much. That was a country that I had a particular attention on. A country that was ruled by a despot, let me call it that way, where the people never agitated. You should ask yourself, why were Libyans not going out of the country during the time of Gaddafi?
Some say he was a benevolent despot.
That is the thing. It's a benevolent despot. That is the right way to call it. You didn't find Libyans struggling to go to America. You didn't find them struggling to go to Europe. Libyans wanted to stay back home. And until what happened. And now you see that it was due to an external force that came in before Libyans could get up and say, well, and they are regretting today. Because when you compare Libyan in dictatorship, in court, before 2011, and Libya in democracy, because now the NATO and Europe and France, they say that Libya now is in democracy. Compare the two, and then you see what is happening. It's a sham.
There is a term used in Libya.
So that is the thing.
But my question is, how does this military takeover guarantee democracy, or are we saying that they should ride Africans towards a different path away from?
Let me just give a quick answer to that. One of the bone of contention of Africans, especially the French African zone, is that of their colonial master, which is France. And at this particular moment, let me tell you, when you see people in Niger rejoicing, they are not rejoicing because a junta has taken over. We should be very careful. It's not. It is because they believe that they had an enemy, and that enemy has been conquered and has been driven away. Let me tell you that if you are not careful, if the military junta that has come over, after having driven the enemy, and they come back now to resolve their problem, and the junta makes some mistakes that the people do not like, they are going to go at him. That is the issue. And therefore, Africans think that they have been caged by somebody. And therefore, they think if these people who have caged Africans We are talking about the colonialists who have come in through neo-colonialism. If these people have caged Africans, if they leave Africans to sit and discuss their problems, because the first thing we should be talking about is having let them go. There is a book I just published about the influence of the missionaries, the influence of the colonial, the imperialists, which of course, if we do not reassert, we do not go back and have a rethink about what is happening. But some people say that it is already deep, it is so deep in us that it is difficult for us to do. But there are solutions to that. That we, after having realized that there is an external hand, let me give an example. There is a French president who openly said he has given an order to President Biya to liberate a political a party president. I mean, when you hear statement like this, you also know of a famous WikiLeaks in Cameroon with the issue of Marafa, whereby there was this discussion that was leaked, whereby some Americans were discussing how the next president. So all of these things come into play, and we are saying that until this external hand, Africans will rejoice if this external hand. Let me even in countries in Africa where you find that people are at peace. Gabon, we didn't even imagine that Gabon could even stay the coup d'etat because they are very peaceful people. But then, just for the fact that they think the Gabonese, they are thinking, okay, maybe this is a war against the French. It may be a sham in Gabon because I don't see that happen like the same thing in Niger and in Burkina Faso. But in Africa as a whole, the far cry has been that. Why is it that some people come to control us with their currency? Why? Why is it that some people come to dictate? Even the constitution that we are talking about, it cannot be framed culturally because these constitutions are colonial constitutions. Many people do not know. They are colonial constitutions. They are not framed according to our realities.
Okay.
Yes. So I think we really need to come to these realities and reassert our identity. Yes.
Okay. Good evening. Leo, extend my greetings to Mr. Robert. He is talking some sense today. Coup in Africa. To the benefits of Africans, see how France is begging not to leave. Niger, that supplies them with uranium that powers up to 70% of their power plants, with Niger citizens going in darkness. NS is writing from Bamenda. I'm not sure of the statistics that I have done or the research that I have seen tells me that Niger is the second uranium supplier to France. That is, they provide 20% of what France is consuming. Kazakhstan is the leading uranium supplier to France with 27%. But there are other countries like Canada and others that supply uranium to France. So, because when I hear 75%, I don't know who is doing the research or just talks. Mr. Elvis from Bamenda. Good evening, Mr. Liu. Africa's democratic problem is that they want to practice Western democracy out of Western mentality. Africa was ready for both African independence and African democracy, but not Western-style democracy. Also, the West was ready to accept African independence, but not African democracy, okay? This one is sending me pictures. I'll look at them later on. Good evening, sir. Please tell him constitution is different from culture, okay? I don't know whether it's to you or... good evening, Mr. Kum and everyone in the studio. I just want to appreciate Robert for making a useful political analysis today. For him acknowledging that leaders can outlive their usefulness in power can or should be applicable to Cameroon. Mr. Kum, welcome back from leave. I'm waiting for one for own bread from Canada. Felix is writing from Amanda. Good evening to you, Felix. Seemingly, we have these coups that are taking place in Guinea, and we've had them in Burkina Faso, in Mali, in Niger, and in Gabon. The question is, what are these guys presenting to the population? In Mali, he's there for over 2 years. In Guinea, over years, and in Burkina Faso, and then we have the one in Niger. Months are going out. What is the platform? What is the pathway that has been presented to the population as a clear demarcation from what they were served previously by those who were ousted? Because does it suffice to say away with France without presenting what has to take care of the population? Have you seen a clear vision from these guys who are taking over?
Yes, there is a clear vision, okay. and it's simple. To understand the clear vision, you will see in the people's support. Now, let me make it
people's support.
Now, I'm coming.
In Guinea, Amadou Doumbouya is there.
Yeah.
Over a year.
Yeah.
What is the vision?
Yeah.
We have teachers who have gone for, I'm sure, 18 months without salaries.
Yeah.
And we have 14,000 teachers or workers who have been sacked.
Yeah.
Is that a vision? In Mali, what is the vision Goita has presented?
Okay.
Or you just see people coming out once France is gone, paradise comes on earth?
What we have to understand here is that the vision these people seek is the
because we may be living in sloganeering, away with France, Abala France, Abala France. Yeah.
Yes. Now, the first thing we have to accept here is that those who are in support of the military leaders in these countries have identified a particular thing which, if it's properly put in place, every other thing is going to fall in place. Now, it is obvious that at this moment, these leaders, they know that the people need electricity, they need hospital, they need schools, they need roads, they need jobs. The list will continue. But these are the things that they need in their countries.
The democratic leaders
I'm coming. Now, there is something we have to understand here, Robert, is that understanding this, if you look at the case of Mali, the leaders, the military leaders, they go to the street, they go to meet the people, and they talk with the people. You see the support they get from the people. In Niger, you realize that they meet the people, they talk with them. In Burkina Faso, likewise. They meet the people, they talk with the people. Now, there is what is ongoing right now in these countries is that they have what they all call a curfew to put the country to order, which every other thing should go to a halt. And when they must have fixed these things, then every other thing as you desire is going to fall in place. There is something I want us to remember here vividly. If we look at the role of the police, we look at the role of the military. The police is there to enforce the law. The military is there to protect both the internal and the external borders of the country. Now, in a democracy, these are the people who ensure that everything that has to be in place should be in place. If you look at reasons for coup d'etats in Africa, they are very obvious. You have, one of the reasons, you have cultural pluralism. It exists. You have economic reasons. It is all there. You have the grievances of the people. Now, when you look at the grievances of the people, is that the economy of the country is in the hands of a particular people who have decided to use their supporters externally and internally. That is why whenever there is a coup in Africa, you realize that some persons within the country, they'll either flee or they are held on house arrest. Now, these are the people internally who are supporting. The external forces, they start putting plans like we have in Niger, where they have said, okay, we want you guys to leave. In Mali, where they have said, okay, you should leave. And you saw them leaving. Now, the bottom line is that to manage your country, because these three countries have identified one thing, insurgency. And where is this insurgency coming from? They have asked themselves questions for over 20 years that if we have such a formidable partner who provides us with the intelligence and information, with weapon, how come do we still have this level of insurgency where most of that resources they take from us, they will pay us not in cash, but they will tell us that they are providing us with security to combat this. And we all know that security, to maintain one's security, it takes more than what you will earn to maintain your security. So, having analyzed these things, these are the plans they have. So most of these people, like you said in Mali, counting, Assimi Goïta says, okay, this is what we are going to do. He goes and meets the people. You remember there was a referendum in Mali. which he organized to understand the people.
But when I listen to you, Lucas, you keep telling me meeting the people. I don't know whether meeting the people is part of a political manifesto and how that translates to working for the welfare. Assimi Goïta, let's take his case.
Yeah.
He took power because seemingly the French were not doing enough to oust the rebels who had taken hold of the north.
Yeah.
He's there for 2 years.
Yeah.
Are the rebels gone?
The situation from the Malians, there's something we have to accept, Mr. Leo.
Okay.
Now, the people in questions are in support of these people. And this is what makes it very difficult for an outsider to think that they are
Which
not
people are in support of which people?
Now, we are looking at the citizens of the said country. Yeah. Now, statistics.
No,
show,
my question.
I'm coming to your question.
Yes.
Now, whether the situation in the north has been put to a hold. Now, we all know that when there is an insurgency, when there is a group such as the Al-Qaeda and the rest that we know, now it takes a longer period to remove them. But what was their problem? They said, with the presence of this high intelligence, in quote, how come do we still have this high level of attack? And if you go back to Mali today, you will realize that the Malians are very much aware that the situation is getting away from.
Or it's getting better.
Yes, or
so
better.
The security situation in Mali is getting better. That for Burkina Faso is also getting better.
That is why that is why they had to form this alliance to see that they themselves get very much involved. They said, I think basically, if we were to look at it within the ambit of human rights, I would say that the people have decided, and if we go by the democracy Dr. Ndimancho talks about, you realize that the majority says, yes, we want the military. Okay. Their right should be respected on that. They have chosen that yes, we want the military because they think that if the insurgency, if the insecurity is put...
How did you know that they said they want the military?
By their
we should not be carried away with the euphoria of the masses in the street shouting, "Whoa!"
Yeah, but we saw the same masses that came out when Bazoum was doing elections, like the case of Gabon. It's the same population that came out. But
so it's a crowd there.
Yes,
that don't come and shout, "Oh!"
Yeah. We have people when SDF comes, they come out.
Yeah, but I think Malave has said that he has analyzed that.
Those who come out at the rallies of elections are not necessarily those who are in support, because many of them, majority don't have even voting cards. That is the issue. They are desperate. So
okay, Paddy Asanga, I want us to look at the situation of these countries and the military leaders. Do you see them actually meeting the aspirations of the people? Because it's not like the population may have endorsed them. The population see them as liberators, having suffered from the excessive price hikes, lack of basic necessities from the civilian presidents who may not have lived up to their expectations. They see the military as the new saviors. What if they do not deliver? Do you see the same population standing by them in the next 3, 4, 5 years if they fail to deliver? And to note that the mandate for a president is 4 to 5 years. Some of them are in power already for half these same mandates. What is the guarantee that they are going to deliver? Because whether we like it or not, they say when we are desperate, we could hang on just anything. The population at this time in Africa could be described as a desperate population, hoping that new saviors are there. What are those indicators that tell us that these guys are going to deliver?
Listen, Mr. Leo, African and countries that you have military takeovers are very, very impoverished countries, and you have certain indicators. Those countries are poor because they have their brute raw material being exported without any form of transformation. And when you listen to them, you know, the only you will never get the experience of a president until you become a president yourself. So when you listen to them speak, and when I hear them quote Gaddafi as their models, and then trying to put them to come together to say they are forming an alliance, especially those in the West African regions, it is reassuring, and when you listen to the animosity and the antagonism that is coming against them from the West, it tells you that they have trampled on the interests of those people who were sapping the natural resources virtually for free. I heard somebody saying that one of your televiewers or commentators throwing comments that Niger, Canada supplies uranium to France and Kazakhstan supplies uranium to France. What if, at what cost do you think that Canada will buy uranium from Canada at the same price that it gets from Niger? I don't think so. Do you think that France would get uranium from Canada at the same price that it gets from Niger or from any other African country where it has a military base, where these uranium exploiting centers are not accessible to anybody? They don't give account on the stock that they transport. It is flown from there, from semi-airstrips and directly to France. I don't think so. Do you think that in Kazakhstan, France is operating the way it is operating in Niger and many other African countries? I don't think so. So, elevating the prices of their raw material that has been exploited from a very long time by France, it is kind of reassuring, because we think that if those raw materials are sold into the free market, more profit will be made, and we hope that is only hoping that this profit will transform into development. It will transform into sharing with the local population, increasing the minimum wages in some of these countries, and maybe building infrastructures. So when you look at it from that point, it is reassuring. The only thing that you can be assured of is that you are going to die. Even what your wife and your children tell you, there is no guarantee that it is the truth until you have seen it happen. That, okay, she said this person was going to come at this time, and this person came at the time. So, but what the military and those who are taking over are doing, they are giving assuring words. They are walking on footsteps of people who have proven. And if you look at these African countries, if they put themselves together, given the wealth and their interwovenness, the market that they have, you would understand why Gaddafi was trying to create a common currency for Africa, and why Libya, even though it was shot within itself, became what it is, and people, the Libyan citizens were not admiring any Western countries. So I think that there is some hope. There is some kind of guarantee, reassuring words that we can hold them accountable when we think that things are going wrong. Remember that Mohamed Bazoum was elected, and he gave some words, but within 2 years, and his actions and deeds did not prove that Mohamed Bazoum was leading people to the right direction. They saw transactions, filthy and shady deals going on in the palace when he took place, and they knew that this man came into power not for the common interest, but for the interest of a clan, for the interest of a group of persons, for the interest of French puppets who helped him win that election. And these people who are military personnel, some of the time security agencies, they see what this dictator do, and they decided that, okay, it is over. Same thing in Mali, same thing in Burkina. There is also, we are not talking about Guinea-Conakry, where you have this guy who's called Mamadi Doumbouya, whom I also see him as a French puppet, like Dengema, who is in Gabon. Remember, Doumbouya also took power in Guinea-Conakry from a coup d'etat on installing Alpha Condé, claiming that Alpha Condé was corrupt. But I think that the reverse is true, and the people of Guinea now are having to rethink. They are reflecting and asking themselves if it was right to take the Bouya. Most of the time, it is a good feeling to have that impression that the devil we know has gone, and an unknown angel is coming, and that unknown angel is embraced until it's proven, or the angel proves his or herself as a devil. That is the sentiment that is reigning in most of these countries where we have coup d'etats. But there are some other countries like Gabon and Guinea-Conakry, which is very glaring that it is just a change of musical chair and it is continuity. You saw what Ngema went and did at the top of Ngema, and you know who is behind this guy, Brice in Gabon. It is Pascaline Bongo and the other clan who don't agree. And I also think that if we want to go by that route, if they mean business, then they should bring us a nationalistic and a Pan-Africanist discourse that would reassure all the other countries. He is running from one country to the other to get the endorsement. And we saw him today with Obiangwema. I'm very sure that next day we'll see him in Yaoundé, and Yaoundé will say, no, we talked to him and we said, let him do everything as fast as possible to hand over power to the civilian rule or reorganize election and so on and so forth. But those are those cheap talks. The people in West Africa are more serious. They are more genuine. I believe them. But apart from Guinea-Conakry and what happened in Gabon is a charade. Thank you, Leo.
Coming in there from Hamburg in Germany, we are going to be coming back to you. I just want to take one or two messages and then we continue with the program. Good evening to you, Mr. Liu. Good evening to the dear panelists. I'm called Boo Armstrong. Came from Yaoundé. I think that military takeover in some African countries is not the best. We think Russia is coming to help us. I too thought the same way until I listened to Kwame Nkrumah's speech where he said some countries will come to us. The Africans are saying that they are the best and that this country is this country is that. Don't believe them. They are coming into for their advantage. The best way is knowing wisely on how to interact with them, being it Russia, China, etc. Military takeover does not guarantee democracy. Thanks. Okay, thank you for that contribution. Good evening, Mr. Liu and your panel. Why does Dr. Ndimancho and most of your regular panelists not speak with this same truth, clarity when it comes to the Southern Cameroon crisis? When it comes to Southern Cameroon crisis, they always seem to speak with water in their mouths, blaming everything on Amber. Julius Chofo, good evening to you. Okay, I don't know what you mean by speaking with water in their mouth. Maybe you just want them to say what you want to hear. Doctor, I don't know how.
Well, I don't understand.
Okay. Good evening, Mr. Liu. My name is Derek Molu, writing from Bamenda. Please, I wish to participate in one of your TV shows. Can you call me after the program or you write to me tomorrow, please? Democracy, like education, is an egg that can either be cracked to fry, hashed with electricity boiled for feeding, or hashed by a hen. Either way, until the right thing is done at the right time for the right reason. We are very far away from the right path. Fonji Peter Nkafu, writing from Bokwai in Boya. Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Liu and the panelists. Please, with due respect, tell Mr. Robert that this platform is not a CPDM meeting where they like frightening people when they're talking to them. J-Boy is writing from Bamenda. I don't know where you are coming from. I don't know whether you threaten anybody. Good evening to the team on board. Mr. Liu, on the results of the military leaders, I think our leaders have taken too long to destroy this country, so to rebuild it, it is not the matter of 2 or 3 years. So let us not be judgmental for the moment. Let's give them some time. Patton Christian is writing from Bagante. Okay. Yeah. Good evening, Mr. Liu and our resource panelists. Democracy has not been successful in Africa. It has created much division among the people, partly because we as Africans were not well educated enough about a democracy. Democracy is a tool for the West to further divide us and milk our resources. There is no single leader in Africa who rigged elections and was not endorsed by the West. So there is no need to keep a system where those who introduced it in Africa cannot defend it. Now, this one will go to you, Robert and Dr. Ndimancho. I want us to understand there is coup d'etat in Mali, in Burkina Faso, in Niger and the rest, and what detailed the war in Guinea and Gabon is that we are going to run for some time and hand back to civilian rule. That is what all of them are saying. Nobody has said that it's going to be military rule. What civilian rule are they going to give? Is it not the same democracy that people are going to be under? For example, when the population ousted the former president of Burkina Faso, Blaise Compaoré, we thought that things were going to move towards the right direction with the civilian rule. A military coup was staged. After the military coup, we have another military coup. How do we now get back to the rails? Are we saying that constitutions are now going to be changed to come up with new forms of governments? If not, when you hand back to civilian rule, what do you expect from them?
Now, the issue is, these military men, they use the weaknesses of the population that they know. Okay, my co-panelists list points why military they take over economic and the rest, but he did not say military also they take over for their own personal gains, which is one of the things he should have mentioned. That military take over for their own proper gains. If they don't feel satisfied with the system and they want to control greed, they take over. Now, when you look at the situation of all this military, they comes in like fake prophets. That the prophet know that your problem is poverty. You come and tell you receive, 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 and you accept him because you think he will make you, you will receive. So these military people, they will look at situation. They know the problem of the population. That the same civil government they know, and they will come and use it, cuddle the people, get into the system, take power, but they will not change. They will not change. Which military government have changed the system of education to bring an African nationalist education and not the Western one? Language, currency. If you say France is exploiting us, you are there. Then you want to send France away, you send the ambassador away, you still use their money, and they still exploit you through that their money. For me, I will not also 100% blast military coup, but the truth is that military coups in Africa has been about 12% successful, and about 88 has destroyed Africa instead. With the 12% I'm talking about, you have people like Gaddafi, you have people like Rawlings, you have people like Paul Kagame that came indirectly. We have military guys that have taken over power. They have transferred into civilian rule, and they have given some effect. So we should also recognize that. But for me, the problem we have is not military. Military cannot just come and change. That is, change everything as if the civilian could not do and the military will do it better. And we should not count on the military to bring democracy, because military, they have their own rules, their own system of governance, their own way of reasoning. That's why in any country, when they take power, they'll tell you pass it to the civilian, because you've got a military training which you don't reason and see things like a bloody civilian will actually do. So these aspects, they are different. But for me,
but Mohamed Morsi is leading Egypt.
And that's why I explained to you that we have aspects that have succeeded. We will not come and say all military leaders that have taken over has failed. But majority indeed did fail. That's the perspective or the aspect I'm talking about. However, talking about our democracy, I still insist that our democracy, Africa need to nationalize its system. Now, I'll make this example, Mr. Leo. Britain colonized India for many years. When Britain was going back, it's only one thing that Indian kept that was from the British: industrialization. Their religion remained their Hindu that they practiced. They did not accept the British man's religion of the white god. Their language remained. Their dressing remained. Their food, they conjugate all their culture that make them Indian. They protected it. And today they are developing faster. But here in Africa, our constitution, I still repeat, our constitutions in Africa don't go with our culture. We still have the civil law, the common law, the French, the white man culture. And we take it, we put it, we call it our constitution. I would say the constitution is very important. That's what protects us, because no, our constitution should go with our own culture that can bind us together. Those are the aspects that we need to look into it. Our educational system should be oriented. The white man should not come and tell us that it's important to go study how to read, write, speak good grammar. And they don't give us, we don't know little or not on technology to develop our educational system. So Africans need to look back on our own. If the richest man in the world came the richest man ever is an Africa, the royalty system, empires that were very powerful existed in Africa. We still have a lot as Africans to look at what our ancestors did to continue with it, and not to depend on what the white man has done, because the white man has come and gone. And we still suffer now with his neo-colonial system that he has kept here. Common word, Francophonie. And when all this is happening, we realize that we are still backward. And when we are still backward, the military will take an advantage to tell you that, okay, this is our situation, we will take over, and this is what we will do, and we still remain in these problems.
Ndimancho, we have trending coups in Africa. The military guys think that civilian rule has not been best. They have not delivered to the expectations of the people. So they are taking over and are telling the world that we are handing over power to civilians in 2 years. What do they want to fix? What are they going to change in the constitution? What, according to you, should be this form of government that they are handing to civilians? And when you say you want to be there for 2 years, what are you going to do to ensure that the civilians do exactly what you expect from them?
Let me come back to what I just said, that we were not ready for democracy. And I think that all of these military coups are coming up because people say it's like they are sending a message that we still have some time to give power to the civilians. One of the things that happen with civilian rule is that there is usually this cabal that people organize within themselves, and they cause the masses to suffer. And one impression that people have about the military is that the military is fearless. The military is audacious. The military can act as a pelican. The military is a fighter. And that the military can do without any fear or favor. That is the idea that the citizens are having about the military. We have had a few examples of how the military has come up, a military leader has come up and has fixed the country and given to the civilian. We can cite the example of JJ Rawlings in Ghana. He came up, fixed the country, put in the race, and left and gave it to the civilian. I think that this is a great example. We have had countries whereby we have had series of coups d'etats, but gradually they have handed to the civilian. We have our next neighbor here, Nigeria, where you have had Nigeria has series of coups d'etats. And in the 1990s, late 1990s, they started with the civilian rule, and it has been moving on well. Well, don't ask me whether with the civilian rule has improved in its management skills and in its administration or what, but I think that it's just to answer your questions to say that the military has a role to play. And even when the military comes over and they say they have 2 years, there is no guarantee of the fact that they will have 2 years. That is a fact. This is to please the international community. This is to please what people want to hear, because of course there must be a time frame where you want to have to organize an election. You will not come over and then want to be there ad infinitum. No way. You will not want to go on and on and on. At least you must give a time frame that from this time to this time. We have had militaries who have come up and given 2 years. After 2 years, they have said, no, we are not yet ripe. We don't yet have the resources. They come up with a reason to say why they cannot organize election. So it is understandable. But one of the things I just want to say here is that, coming back to the fact that we, as I said, are not ready for independence, I think the militaries want to act like pelicans. That bird that wounds itself to feed its young. Yes, of course, I don't rule out the fact, as Mr. Kedia said, that the military should take power for their own personal gains. But of course, that could always be. There is no leader in this world that will not want personal gains too. Yes. There is no leader who sells and sells per se. Yes. All is about interest, you know. And I think that if we believe that there is somebody who came up and the Christians, they put it so well, that Jesus came up and came, suffered and died for humanity, and died at the age of 33, then we could equally believe in the fact that the military thinks that, okay, I'm coming to break up all of this entanglement that the civilians have put the citizens into, and when I must have broken all of these, now I know that the country now is free, and that there is respect, mutual respect for everyone, not anyone at a level, so much at a level of authority and others at a level of solidarity, and that we are now going to be at the same level to organize elections whereby there will be accountability. Because one of the tenets of the military is what? Is respect the rule of law. The rule of law. And so we believe that when a military comes up, it comes up with that what we call commandement. And when in commandement, you say this is this, it is it. This is what we come to believe. And the military coming up wants to implement, and the people are happy that if this entanglement is external, then the military could be able to work on that. But what disappoints is when somebody comes up and a twinkle of an eye, he's already over there, still doing the same thing, going to Europe, like I saw Dumbuya the other day, he's in France, trying to also create his own relations. So I think the military has a role. The military per se has a role, the role of creating fear in the people. That is the first thing. The fear that some people think may never have entered into the country, or the country never have had, the military now come and create that fear. And those who thought they were all and all in the country now bow down to that military. And now everybody thinks that now order can come back, and order can come back in the country for, things to start afresh and new. And who knows? I think Africa should go back to that. And if we go back to that and say that we are ruled by military juntas and the people are happy, what is the problem? Is democracy actually the all and all that Africa needs?
Okay. Some people say there is the urgent need for a deconstruction of the dysfunctional systems to set up a completely new system or adopt what works for each country based on its peculiarities. How do we achieve this?
We have to accept that the world does no longer live in isolation. There are things that you could work it out to suit you, but with regards to the world, for example, you cannot live in total isolation. The military, which is in control of some of these countries, the resources that they have, given that they do not yet have the ability to take it to the finished product, they will depend on selling it to some other persons. Now, what does this mean? If you want to fix up your system, taking into consideration who you are, we have a dysfunctional system. Yes, what is this system? It is the system where the colonialists have returned in neo-colonialism. That is summarily the system which is not working. They have returned, and they have one objective. Knowing that you cannot actually finish that which you have in your country, they have brought in persons that will handle this and that will give them account of that which they deserve. Now, this is where most of our leaders find it very difficult. And to make a system that will suit you, Africans are in need of it. But it is not the only thing that we need, because you have to accept. Now, to imagine that the military in Niger not necessarily having the same situation like the military in Burkina Faso comes to an agreement. This is to tell you that a people can group themselves to identify the common factor. And what is the common factor? that thing that is not right in these countries. This is summarily what we can do. Now, it will also be difficult because there is homogeneity in language, but there isn't that homogeneity in our culture with regards to this. But the only thing that can push that system that is not working for you to make a workable system, it will require that you should first of all identify. And in Africa, what have we identified? Particularly in these countries where we have this recurrent military coup taking place. It is the economy. Now, this is it. The social fabrics of most countries away from the African continent, if you were to compare to African or some African beliefs, you would have seen that there are certain cultural values that we do not accept. But what are these countries doing? They have identified that which they all need, and they are putting it in place. And this is where we say that our contemporary leaders in Africa, they have decided not to work in accordance with the people. They are working with respect to the multinationals that are in their country, because most of these guys that we have, they are greedy. So the military leaders, what they have identified is, we want to break this greed. There is the aspect of greed. There is the aspect of the desire to lead by some of these military guys. But what is most important is, if they should build a system that protects their people. I listed a couple of things that these people need. They need good hospitals. They want to go to the hospital and be treated on time. They need good roads. They need water. They need energy that they can manage themselves with. But within the countries where we have this military coup, these things, they have been lacking for years. Like Malamfe said, to imagine that a country goes for 90 days in a year without electricity, and that supplies 20% of another country's energy, where that country does not rely on 80% from a single country. It also buys from other countries. This will tell you and I that what is happening within that country is the greed, because at the level of the presidency, you always have power. There will be regular energy supply. But what happens to that guy in the hinterland? That young man who relies on that barbing studio, that barbing shop, to cut the hair of people and also make money. Because we look at these things, we think they do not matter. If you look at Africa, the informal economy contributes more to the people's welfare than the formal economy. If you look at the situation in Africa, come to Douala, for example, you will see these things. Go to Kumba, you will see the same. You go to Yaoundé, you will see the same. You come to Boya, you will see the same. So where the informal economy do not have the necessities to take its will to that position where the people have to live and live in accordance with that which they desire. And when they see a messiah coming, such as the military that we have, because the military in these countries, as we all know, they have proven themselves to be the messiah. Now, there is another worry I have, and the worry is that as opposed to the democratic leaders put in place, whenever the military take over, we claim to be at the forefront of the people's welfare. The first thing we will do is that we will block them from our different borders. Then we claim that we are working for the people. Now you will say that you want to put in place people who have constituted or people who have carried out constitutional coup. People whose term, when it's about going to an end or coming to an end, they go back to the parliament, get a few people with little or no concern of the people, then tell them to do that which they will do. And now when the military take over in these countries, now we will come up to say, no, we are giving them sanctions. Now when you sanction that few people, what is the main thing here? These are the things that goes back to trigger the population when you must have subjected them to pain and agony. The people, now the summary in this is that they want to put the military in a very discomfort position with the population. When the population start feeling the pain, that they will rise up against the military to go back and force them to drop things. So what is most important is that we should, when we think about the people, whether it is the military that is in place, if we truly have the people's concern on the ground, as we put it, then we should follow what the people need. Because the military in most cases, they do not even constitute 1% of the entire population of the country.
Fusi Cornelius from Tico says we should fight first democracy coup before military coup in Africa. Any coup which the head of state is less than 8 or 10 years in power should not be accepted in Africa. Okay, good evening to all of you watching us are from Tico Subdivision, Fako Division, Southwest Region. Good evening, Mr. Liu. I am Kum Dixon from Kombe. Mr. Liu, to be sincere with you, I think military coup is the best option to stop these long-term serving presidents. A country that prefers politics as a high source of income more than an entrepreneur, the country is bound to rare poverty, okay? In Cameroon, our system is not good. We wish these leaders to resign. The youths have no chance. They should not be surprised of what our youth may do because of frustration. In Cameroon, our systems are not good, okay? This one says, democracy is an egg that can either be cracked or fried. I'm sure I read that message already. Now, Paddy Asanga, we're talking about this trending coup d'etats in Africa, and some persons are saying on this platform that Africa was not ready for independence in the 1960s. Others are saying that we were not ready for democracy, and giving the impression that we are not ready for independence or democracy. How do you see these guys who now are taking power looking at their independence? Almost everybody says we should do away with France, but we see them clinging on to Russia and China. Is that the best way to our independence?
Listen, Mr. Liu, the idea of multipolarism and geopolitics warrants that you should not cling to one country. Go and look at the Sacred Accords that tells you that your natural resources belongs to France. Unless France is not interested, then you can go in and look for other countries. That is not right, and it should never have been that way. And to those people who are saying that Africa not ready for independence, but democracy or the other way around, they are all wrong. They are all wrong in the sense that before the white boys came to Africa, Africa was functioning, and every country has its civilization that evolves with time and in a particular context. So when they say those statements, I don't think we needed to be, first of all, colonized before being given independence. Who were we before independence or before colonizations, and what was our identity? So that is a very cheap rhetoric, and I hate this post-independence, post-neo-colonial state that we are, which are separated by visual boundaries. Remember that our existence were main, before they came, where our divisions were based on geographical boundaries. They were either hills, valleys, mountains, or rivers, and all that stuff. But we still had ways to navigate and cross over, get what we get from our neighbors who are Africans before the colonialists, and gave them also what they needed from us without anybody coming to call me a Cameroonian, a Nigerian, a Chinese, Guinea-Conakry, Guinea-Bissau, RD Congo, Congo Zaire, Congo Brazzaville, and all that stuff. No, we should stay away from this rhetoric and sit up and look into ourselves in the mirror. Now, if you want to look at those two arguments, you understand that we should have never been colonized in the first place. And the decolonization of Africa was not because they loved us so much. Remember that prior to the decolonization, there was slave trade, and after slave trade, there was colonization. And when we talk about slave trade, you understand that it was a trade. There was somebody who was willing to buy, and there was somebody who was willing to sell. Under what conditions? Those are discussions for a different day. So all these things have to be put in context to understand that Africa should never have been colonized in the first place. Talk less of copycatting a system that has been practiced for 50 years and come and impose it on a people that just know you for barely, let me say, 100 years. Because all those missionaries that came to Africa and were trying to preach their religions, they never came out with political system. They were not talking about governance, good governance or bad governance and all sort of those crazy stuff that they are saying today. They came and they were telling you how there was God, how there was a white boy, Jesus, that died for your sake. Do you know Jesus? You have to give your life to Christ. And then they came in, the Muslims saw that they were invading Africa also. They came in with Mohammedanism and Islam and all that stuff. All those are the techniques that brought the white boys and the Arabs and whosoever you want to call them into Africa. So when we want to limit ourselves to the colonial issue, then we are wrong. We have to find our real identity and do our anthropological research and see who we are before the white boy ever stepped foot in Africa in the 18th centuries. I think it's Alfred Secker or whosoever in 1884 or whosoever they were at the time. You know, my memory of history is being faded by this contemporary event that is taking over in Africa today, and I'll have to consult my book. So if I'm wrong, I think there are other panelists on this platform who will correct me. And from that premise, you will understand that Africans have evolved from slave trade to evangelization, from evangelization to colonialism, from colonialism to neo-colonialism, and from neo-colonialism to outright emancipation. Let me put it that way, because I don't want to call it independence. I want to say Africans are emancipating themselves, not only from what the colonial system, but also from the imported religions and all that it takes. So China, as a business partner, as a country that we can learn and they need something from us, they should come. And then when they are going back, we exchange technology. Russia, you're welcome. France, you're welcome. Americans, you're welcome. We need all this technology to be able to compete with other nations, with other Western countries. Where was Singapore in 1986? Well, China in 1986, and so on and so forth. So it is from that premise that we have to look at it, that Africa is not a cake that is reserved for one person, a birthday cake of France, of de Gaulle, or Paul Ojula, or Kennedy, John Robert Kennedy. I see there is a street in his name. I don't know the symbolic behind it or the rationale behind naming a street after Kennedy, who has never even set foot in Africa and all that stuff. So we should rethink and emancipate ourselves, get our dignity, and stop saying that democracy is good or democracy is not. We have to find our identity, forge a way, be able to be competitive with other nations, be it China, America. We have the enough resources, we have the human power, we have a youthful generation that is the working force. And what we need now is transfer of technology, and every African who's working in every European factory should be a spy that would steal that technology and bring it back to Africa. That is the way I look at it, and I'm glad for that. I was part of this brilliant panel, and I still want to say thank you, and you're welcome back home. Keep the flame burning.
Thank you, Paddy. We are living this days of coup d'etats in Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, and Guinea, and behind us, Gabon. What is the message that Africans or the politicians should get from the military guys that should direct them on how to readapt their strategies in manning their respective positions? Because we listened to the guy in Gabon who said that it is over with persons who are struggling to do constitutional coup d'etats, that you do your 2 mandates and you leave. Is that the message, wanting people to respect what is expected of them by the population?
You see, we may condemn coup d'etat, but the issue is that when they talk about coup d'etat, irresponsible democratic elected people, or those that have been elected through the other way, at least when they look at the coup d'etat, they become conscious, and of course they arrange certain things. There are some die-hearted ones that when they look at coup d'etats and they look at the complaints in that country, they try to adjust the problem in their own country. While there are some others that when they look at coup d'etat, they try to instead adjust their military, like Paul Kagame did in Rwanda, that immediately as a coup d'etat was announced, he instead tried to adjust his military rather than looking at what his people actually want. So that point is actually clear, Mr. Liu, that when there is coup d'etat around, many leaders, they try to adjust to ensure that it should not happen in their country. I want to take this opportunity to talk to people in the CEMAC zone, especially those in a particular country that they are praying that it should be a coup d'etat there. Sorry, there will be no coup d'etat in that country you are thinking about. Better go and register for the next coming election. I know the people of that country in CEMAC has understood what I'm saying. So it is time for those that have been elected to adjust their system to ensure that they serve the people. They should know that they are servants of the people, and they should not stay in the high horses, because if they don't do it, when the people will be dissatisfied, there are two things involved. As I earlier said, we have the popular coup, where the population themselves will go into the street to say, we don't want you, we are tired. We do have that one before having the military coup, that it is the military that will come out. We have seen countries where the population have come out, say they are tired. They use military against the 1 month, 2 month, 3 month, and finally the military turned and they told the president that with the way the population is, I think you will have to go. So those in power should be aware that they have to serve the people, and let the lesson of other presidents that did not serve their people and the military brought them out should be a lesson to those leaders, so that they should do their best, so that the military will not send them away, so that they will start crying on TV that people should make noise. Because if you are a leader, you don't serve your people very well, when the military will come to remove you, the people will support the military. And when you say they should make noise, nobody will make noise. Even those that you were sharing oil, rice, and so on with them, they will not join you.
Thank you. Good evening and welcome back, Mr. Liu, and special greetings to all your level-headed resource persons. I'm Dr. Asani Jude from Nsungkikang in Cambe. From my perspective, there is no long-term solution for either a military or civilian leadership in Africa until when the current regime starts serious economic empowerment through reshaping our educational systems towards our technology and transformation of local raw materials and increased industrialization. Thank you. Dr. Michael, we are looking at the best form of governments that should serve the interests of Africans. What would you propose? But before that, good evening, Mr. Leon. Welcome back. We need to decolonize our minds from this democracies come from the West. Before they came, we had been handling ourselves via chiefdoms and fiefdoms without problems. Kevin Kenneth is writing from Douala. Yes. Doctor?
The best form of government.
Yes.
Sometimes
in context.
Yeah, that's right. Sometimes I want to avoid to give this kind of foreign definitions to what governments are, because you want to take it from democracy, and when you want to take it from democracy, you want to start from Greece, how it started, and you start defining what it's about. But I think that simply, like the socialists would say, government for the people and by the people and for the people. That is what the socialists, they say. The government that it has the people at heart, and the government that is for the people. It means that this is a government that is being run by pelicans, as I always like to call, those who have the people at heart, who know about, who feel the suffering of the people. That is what the socialists, they actually say. So if in that context, I would say that the best form of government is that which actually should be able to sacrifice, for the people. But then, I wanted just to say something about this issue of coup, and to say that it didn't start with us. When you look at the issue of Karl Marx, where Karl Marx actually in his Marxist theory, where he talks about the proletariat rising against the bourgeoisie, it is something that is even in every family or in every village, in every homestead or whatever that happens. That when it is not going, when the bourgeoisie, when those who are in a better position, they are eating, and those down there, who they call the proletariat, the have-nots, do not eat. Yes, there is always that plot, there is always that eager desire to overthrow and take over in order to make a difference. I think that it is in history, it is like that. Even in heaven, it happened when Lucifer, does it with wanted to be like God, you know. That is it. Lucifer wanted to be like God, and therefore, when God realized that, he threw him off. And even the Garden of Eden, when the snake, according to what the Bible tells us, I know that's fiction. When they say the snake would ask Adam and Eve, God doesn't want you to eat of that tree in the middle of the garden, because he knows that when you eat, you will be like him. And what did they do? They ate it. So it is a human. It was so sweet. The feather was so sweet. So you know, I think that this is a human. It's a human desire. It's a human ambition to be to rule, to be better in life. So I doubt whether there's even ever a condition that will satisfy every human being, because even the most perfect democracies, which of course I don't think there's any, there is always that need to change. Why do in America? Why do they change one from Republicans to Democrats, this and this? It is all because people are thinking that something needs to get better and better and better. So there is nothing like we say that at one moment, are these schools going to stop? They are not going to stop, because even if they stop with the barrel of the gun, Constitution will continue. In America, there was accusation of Donald Trump having leaked the election in collaboration with Russia. So all of those things, you know, you find that it is human desire to get things better.
Good evening, Mr. Leo, and your panelist, Prince Bile Fende, writing from Palma in Spain. For the topic of today, I think Africa needs to go back to its old ways of governance. This thing called democracy is just one of the big grammar brought up by the white man to destabilize Africa, just for the fact that we have numerous ethnic groups. We need to put in place laws that are very harsh to avoid embezzlement, theft, cheating, and crimes against the land, e.g., death by hanging or firing squad. By these laws, people will be afraid to commit crimes. For all I care, military leadership is no guarantee for good governance. Okay. Good evening to you, Prince Bile, and we are glad to always read from you. You are one of our favorite audience. Greetings to you and your panel, Leo. The military has training, and this training isn't to be at the harem, but what pushes them there is most cases is bad governance by civilians, tendency to remain in power forever. Tell me, when the government officials enrich themselves while the citizens get poorer by the day, what do you expect? Our advice, Kedia, to direct that advice to his champion, okay? What should be the best way forward for African leadership?
Well, the best way for, I think the way forward is the African leaders should accept that we have accepted a document called the Constitution, and they should respect it. I cannot say this without using Cameroon as an example. When the constitutional coup d'etat took place in Cameroon, when Paul Biya and his people decided to change the constitution to give him an infinitum,
the assembly are not Paul Biya.
I'm coming, you get it. Now, this is what we call constitutional coup. You understand? It was done in Cameroon. Paul Biya and his people did this. And if they respected this, and these are some of the things that have also brought strife and the tensions that we have in Cameroon today. We cannot say these things leaving Cameroon aside. Cameroon is at the center of all what we are saying. Now, the difference is that as much as many people will not accept that these things should happen,
we are talking about
Africa.
We are talking about coups in Africa.
And how do we prevent this?
You cannot say Cameroon is at the center. Yeah.
No, what I'm saying is that how do we prevent this?
Okay.
Now, to prevent this, I am saying that the leaders in this country should respect the constitution. If you go to Niger, if you go to Mali, for example, there was a constitution to to punish those who embezzle. There was a constitution to ensure that the people have a better life. It was not respected. And if you fail to do these things, like Dr. Ndimancho said, the repercussion is that the people, they will come after you.
Yeah, but
and there will be they might not come after you the way you see it.
That should be done legally now.
Yeah, there are two. Please, Mr. Leo, we cannot.
Are you saying that the constitution of Niger says that when the people are not satisfied, the military should stage a coup?
The constitution does not say they should stage a coup. The constitution says you respect the people. And when you fail to respect the people,
the military takes over? Is that part of the constitution? Because you have been singing about respecting the constitution here.
Now, what I'm saying is this. Now, remember that the people have the right. They did put you there. You are their employee, not the other way around. Now, when you fail to respect them, and there is someone who is going to enforce their decision, I keep saying that if
by
you look
disrespecting the constitution.
No, if you look at this, please. Now, we have two sets of people. Now, the military in a country is there. At the beginning, I said this. The military in a country is there to protect the country from internal and external threat. And where a leader in that country fails to do the right thing, the military in this case haven't identified the internal and the external threat. No, don't tell me that. No, it's possible.
It is there in the constitution.
The military,
If you are not happy with the leader, remove them through election.
The military is there to protect internally and externally.
They are changed through elections.
Where the military identify that your rulership can risk the people from the external and the internal, they have the right to take a decision.
Which constitution says that? Where do you even thinking about
I'm giving to you the description of the military. They are to protect.
There is no description of the military like that.
The military of a country
in democracy, you don't want a leader, you remove him through election.
What you are saying, is it found in the constitution?
What I am saying is that
when they say to protect, it doesn't mean that they should stage a coup.
Mr. Leo, let's say this thing the way they should be. This is a military of a country whose job is to protect the people and their property. And when you identify that the people and their property cannot be protected like they saw in the case of Mohamed Bazoum, the military decided that no, the resources we have in our country, we give these people 20% of their energy. We have gone for 90 days in a year. I'm coming. We have gone for 90 days in a year without electricity in our country. And this is the minimum we get from them, whereas we could sell this at this cost. They said, okay, we are going to remove Bazoum and we will bring in these people, General Chani, and he should ensure that there should be a better life. And that is why the people already, the uranium in the country is not being sold as it was sold to France before. And the people are supporting it. The people are comfortable with that.
Yeah, but the who made General Chani president? He took power.
The people supported.
He took power. Because the people are also hoping that he's going to deliver.
So you can see that if you were to go by the democracy of the majority who are the people of Niger,
those people are accept that.
Yes, please. Just land. Let him land. We're out of time.
Yes. So I think African leaders, the summary is they should respect the constitution of their country. They will either be provoking the people to go to the extreme, which they will not be satisfied at a certain point.
Okay, we want to thank you, Dr. Michael, for coming, as well as Ndi Lucas coming all the way from Boya, and you, Robert Malangfe, and Paddy Asanga. Are you still there? He's gone?
Yes, Leo. I had to give my civilities to you and your panelists before I leave. Okay. You see, I am already dressed. I have to go and get something for the children because they are going through some training. I want to thank you, thank your panelists, and whenever you have interesting topics, let us know if we can chip it something and we'll come. You know, my Media Prime has given Anglophone the voice. We speak in a language that we are comfortable with. We are not mixed up. We are focused, and you have come to stay, and you have made some of us, and some of us have also made your house what it is today. I want to thank you and thank everybody on the panel, especially my friend Kedia. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Paddy, and Dr. Ndimancho, thank you for coming. Robert, thank you, and Mr. Ndi, thank you, and all of you who took time off to watch this edition of the program. Desmond and Eli, we are eternally grateful for the great job you guys have been doing out here, not forgetting you, Tabi Tambe Bryant, for always supervising our work. Stay blessed. Bye-bye.